But first of all, I want to start by welcoming Mónica, Professor Mónica Ramos-Mejía. Please, the floor is yours.
Hello. Hello, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. I want to thank NEST for the invitation and the Transitions in the Global South Early Career Researchers Group. I think this is a great opportunity. As I'm a researcher from the Global South, located in the Global South, I think this is a great opportunity to share my thoughts and ideas and research findings. So what I'm going to present to you today, it's not a comprehensive study of what's going on in sustainability transitions in the Global South. It's much more my reflections and of course what you'll see, it's been filtered by my own background. So I just want to make sure that you know that you're going to hear from me like a part of the discussion, but it's much more about it. And then I think the contributions from the researchers who are also doing research on the Global South will be very complementary. So I hope you enjoy it, and please take lots of notes to your ideas and comments and questions, because I'd be very happy to have a conversation in the end. Let me share my screen, which is, where is it here? Okay, so can you see my screen now?
Yes, Mónica.
Okay, great. Okay, so as Catarina said, I work at Javeriana University in Bogota. I work at a management school in the sustainability area. So I basically look at the way business actors contribute to sustainability transitions. And this may happen, I mean, this contribution might be like positive, like helping the transition or pushing the transition, or just making the transition happen, or can be delaying the transition or rejecting the transition. So I look at that, and I look at the strategies that business deploy to do that. Okay, so let me start. I want to share with you today these 4 main points, and I also going to start the chronometer. Okay. So first, I would like to talk a bit more about what characterizes the Global South. As Katarina said, it's a problematic term. When reviewers are reviewing something about the Global South, they are never happy about the terms that we use. If you use developing or emergent economies, so I think it's important to talk about that, what we mean what we talk about the Global South, and then the challenges of sustainability transitions in the Global South. And this is very connected to topics that are being addressed on the Global South, and methodologies that have been used in the Global South. And finally, I would like just to finish with some reflections about what sustainability transitions in the Global South can teach to sustainability transitions in the Global North. Okay, so when we talk about the Global South, we mean something that's beyond level of industrialization or GDP. So it's not related to economic performance. So sometimes when you find defined as emergent economies, I think it's also quite problematic in the sense that it's much more than economics. I think it's more related to institutional particularities. what does it mean? That the rules of the game in the Global South are quite contested and personalized at various extents. And because of that, large groups of people are left behind. And when I say that large groups of people are left behind, I mean that there are lots of communities that don't have access or have like bad access to many services in all the topics that we study: mobility, water and sanitation, the urban development, food, everything. So this happens because it's been argued that the Global South is the context of market imperfection, clientelist and social exclusive communities, patriarchal households, and patrimonial and or marketized states. So what does it mean? In terms of market imperfection, you could say, okay, market imperfection happens everywhere. So it's true. So markets are not perfect anywhere. The thing is that that doesn't happen alone. I mean, that happens together with clientelist and social exclusive communities. What does it mean? It means that communities don't have the right to access some services, but so access is not given as a right, but it's given according to clientelist relationships. So for instance, I don't know, in terms of water, drinking water. So there's not like a proper water provision system, but there's some water and it's controlled by some groups. And according to your relationship with that groups, you have access or not. So you don't have access to water because it's a right. It's just because you perform better or worse in the clientelist relation with that powerful group. Patriarchal households and patriarchal households. This basically relates to gender issues, and it's not only about men and women. It's basically about many sorts of differentiations. So these differentiations are very subtle, and in different communities, they are more complex than in other communities. But things related to age, gender, education, ethnicity, class, define many of the things that you can access to or not. Patrimonial and or marketized states. This is very related to the last point, where I say that states are weak and sometimes illegitimate and hardly differentiated from other power systems. What does it mean? That in the Global South, you don't find very often a state that it's transparent and it's protecting the rights of the citizens. I mean, ideally it is, but actually this state is co-opted by different elite groups. So you don't have like counterbalance between economic powers and political powers, and but they are co-opted. So in the end, elites who have the control of states, of the state, like they just want to, or they just work for perpetuating their privileges. So in the end, we have systems in which the privileges of a few reproduce like all the time. At the same time, that patterns of social exclusion reproduce. So I call all this together a mixture of well and ill functioning formal and informal institutions. So they're both formal and informal institutions, legal and illegal institutions, are there. They're very diverse. Sometimes it works well, but very often they work against large groups of people. So this is the main scenario, the main institutional scenario that we find in the Global South. So socio-technical changes in this scenario have lots of challenges. And that's what I want to talk about here. Socio-technical changes in the Global South bring winners and losers. And you could say, okay, that happens everywhere. Yes, that's true. But here it's a matter of justice. Why? Because what I just mentioned. We have institutional arrangements where most of the time the privileges of a few are reproducing. So when these socio-technical changes perpetuate that exclusion or that ill-functioning institutions, actually we are not getting much. So we could be greener, but not sustainable. And I have here, I think, a very relevant quotation from Mark Swilling. I want to read it, and it says, a just transition would consist of a dual commitment to human well-being with respect to income, education, and health, and sustainability with respect to decarbonization, resource efficiency, and ecosystem restoration. So it's not only about greener technologies, it's very much about reconfiguring power balance within production and consumption systems. And I think this is the main challenge, where it's really necessary to be aware of these institutional processes to study sustainability transitions in the Global South. So I tried to look for research that has been done in the last years, say in the last 3 to 4 years, where this institutional idea of what characterizes the Global South is relevant. And I find it very interesting because this way of understanding the Global South talks to researchers who are doing research in Ethiopia, Kenya, Madagascar, Mali, Namibia, Rwanda, South Africa, Tanzania, Uganda, Australia, India, Indonesia, Philippines, Vietnam, Hungary, Israel, in Latin America, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Mexico, Nicaragua, and Peru. And I found very interesting one paper about sustainability transitions in Canada, but it was related to indigenous communities. So it's interesting because what I'm talking here about this institutional diversity and the mixture of well and ill functioning formal and informal institutions doesn't take place in the global north, or researchers don't look at that. So I think this is really interesting because we could say, okay, this is something that is important here. So we really need to look at the way formal and informal rules perpetuate the privileges of a few, undermining the well-being of many. And what are these papers about? So they are about the same topics that we study in the global north. And this is really interesting because we study energy systems, mobility, urban transitions, agri-food socio-technical systems, everything related to water and sanitation and waste. And there are other general topics that I think it's really interesting, related to green economy, entrepreneurship, inclusive innovation, sustainable development goals. And this is interesting because there's a question about growth. So if we need to grow, how do we do that? So we talk about the green economy, we talk about the role of entrepreneurs, we talk about another sort of innovation, inclusive innovation, and of course, sustainable development goals are very relevant in the global south. So it's as if sustainability transitions were an opportunity for a better growth scheme. In terms of research questions, there are many topics, and I think the researchers that will talk later will go a bit more in depth in this, but topics related to governance, powers, who are the actors involved, topics of exclusion or inclusion, informality, and bottom-up processes are always very present in the Global South research and sustainability transitions. And we can also find deeper discussions about the political economy of sustainability transitions. So what happens when we have, for instance, international aid as the promoter of sustainability transitions in a country? Discussions about capitalism, and I think that one is really interesting because there's a reflection, like in the end, is it possible to have just sustainability transitions within the context of capitalism, where we have some large countries who are the winners and many other countries who are the losers of the capitalist system? So the debate on capitalism has started to be in the sustainability transitions in the global south, and related to that, debates related to worldviews and epistemes. So the global south, in the global south, you find evidence of other ways of development, of other ways of understanding who we are, who humans are, what's the role of humans in this planet, who we think we are in relation to nature, and other different ways of knowing. So the Western modern episteme is just one way of understanding of reality, but it's much broader, and you find that in the global south. So by doing research on the global south, you can, I mean, this is evident, you uncover things like that. So it becomes like another research arena. And I think in the end, what we want as researchers working on the global south is the expansion of conceptual frameworks, or finding novel conceptual frameworks that are able to uncover the nuances of sustainability transitions in the global south. And you could say, yes, we want to do the same in the global north. Yes, we always want to expand conceptual frameworks and make them more sensitive to reality so that we can really understand what's going on. The thing in the global south is that this institutional diversity, or this institutional scenario where you find ill and well-functioning institutions, makes necessary to have very sensitive frameworks so that you can capture those nuances. And that's very related to methodologies, because methodologies allow you to see just some things. I mean, the way you study is the lens that you use to understand something. So if you want to see more, or you want to see differently, or you want to uncover alternative things, so some methodologies need to do that. And I think the methodological challenge in the global south is quite I mean, I think that is a great challenge. So I have here some of them. So first, in relation to quantitative research, basically we find lack of reliable data because of lack of capacity. So for instance, you want to have I don't know, in the global north, it's much easier to find reliable databases related to different industries, different technical systems, information about communities, but in the global south, there's very little of that. And when you find reliable data, very often it's very aggregated, or only like large cities. For instance, in Colombia, you find good, like reliable data related to the 5 main cities, but the rest of the country, you don't know anything about. So you have the challenge to build your own databases, and this means lots of resources in terms of time and money to do that. In relation to qualitative research, the challenge is, or the challenges are a bit different. In relation to data collection and analysis, the main important thing are issues of positionality. When you have a research encounter, you as a researcher are positioned within power structures too. And that enables you to have access or not to some groups or information. So the researchers' gender, age, ethnicity, among other things, affect the suitability of particular research methods and therefore interpretations. And I think that's very important in relation to how you do research in the global south. If you come from the global north, perhaps you need good research partners, or you need to be aware of who your research partner is. For instance, at the moment I'm doing another research project, and it's been interesting to find that grassroots organizations, grassroots environmental organizations are not connected and don't want to be connected to the main large transnational environmental NGOs. But in Bogota, so policy is, when it's participatory, it's only participatory, including those large, well-known green NGOs. So this connection is huge. So that's important in relation to your research partners, and taking into account if you're a woman, what it means, if you're a man, I mean, what is expected from your behavior. There's not much that we can change, but it's very important to be aware of that, because the data we collect is mediated by these things. So we need to be aware of that when we interpret our research findings. There's lots of experiments taking place in the global south, sustainability transitions experiments. And I think here the main challenge is understanding whose view prevails. Many of these experiments take place in the context of international cooperation or engaged scholarship or action research or transdisciplinary research. And I think here we find issues of participation that are very relevant. Who participates, whose voices prevail? When you say we have a participatory process, actually it's really important to know who is joining the process and who's not, and why. So asking about whose view prevails is really important to be sensitive towards that. And finally, I would say that the underlying challenge, or the main challenge, is about decolonizing research. in terms of both analytical frameworks and methodologies. We do science, or we are trained to do science in a Western way, based on the modern episteme, and we only see that. So there's been for many years a call for decolonizing research, and actually at the moment there are interesting things happening. So for instance, if you think this is interesting, you can check STEP Center work on methods, or the University of Bath Center for Decolonizing and knowledge teaching, research and practice. They are doing interesting things to uncover the way our research practices are colonizing. So how can we decolonize them? Or you could also read Arturo Escobar's work, whatever that, his work from 1995 related to encountering development, to his latest work from last year on pluriversal politics. This is quite complex, but I think it's important if we are researchers working on the Global South and in the Global South to be aware of this of this colonizing science. So I think that's the main underlying challenge that we need to address. Well, and finally, when Katarina asked me to think about what could be some learnings from sustainability transitions in the Global South, that I think, well, I've been thinking a lot about it because our institutional contexts are very different. But I think the main gift from the Global South is diversity. And it's related to all sorts of diversity. It's related to institutional diversity, to biodiversity. There's a diversity of pathways to anything, like transformation pathways. So I think understanding that the Global South, it's a place, but it's difficult to say it like that in the Global South you find lots of alternatives to socio-technical challenges. I think it's the most important learning, like opening up the vision of what sustainability transitions mean, and opening it up in relation to actors, technologies, social practices, epistemic diversity. So I think this diversity is a great notion that it's important that sustainability transitions researchers embrace when doing research anywhere. So I think in the Global South is much more evident, but I think it's important to become sensitive to that and to open up our minds and our research practices in sustainability transitions. So that's it. I think I was a bit quick. It's 25 minutes only. That's great because we'll have more time for discussion. So I would be really happy to hear what you think about what I've talked about here, your comments if you have any question, or if you want to continue a further discussion, please contact me. So these are my contact details, my email address at Javeriana University, and my Twitter account. So thank you very much.